Welcome everybody to today's session. First off, as Heather said, I'm David Pope. I'm joining you today from Cleveland, Ohio, where I'm looking out over up north towards Canada. Still a little hazy here from the fires that were up there the last couple of weeks and so. So I'm going to share my screen with you as we get going today, and it'll take me a second just to do this to make sure everything works on my side. So perfect. So as Heather said, I'm going to talk today about building strategies for building connections between Techniqu and Repertoire. As I'm talking about this today, it hits home a lot to me. Last night, over the last week, I've actually just finished teaching a summer camp yesterday. We had our concert last night with about 160 string students. To be honest, my brain is still digesting how to get students to play something correctly, and more importantly, how to get them to transfer that skill to another piece of music or another method book exercise or another warm-up without me having to reteach it. That's where my brain is still living this morning. As I was telling Heather as we were talking beforehand, I've done that for the last week and a half. And as I was catching up on stuff around the house this morning and working around the house, that's still what I'm trying to think about. That was the conversation that the 7 co-conductors that I have at this camp with us, that we had at lunch, is how do we teach our students to do that and retain and think ahead and learn how to transfer. I remember even asking the students this week, it was probably the 5th or 6th day of camp, is who likes to rehearse the same passage day after day? And none of the students actually raised their hand at all. I kind of laughed at that. And my other teacher in the room laughed too, because we're like, she was one of the first ones to raise her hand, because she's like me. I don't like teaching the same thing day after day. I know it, because it's not fun for me. It's very straightforward. It's easy to lesson plan, I joked with the students, but it's not what I want to do. I don't want to teach my students the same thing day after day. I want them to learn the skills and transfer those skills to other things, so I don't have to teach them that skill. So as we start today, I want to think about why we're focusing on connecting Techniqu to Repertoire. The first thing that we're thinking about as I'm going through this is my students need to spend more time on fundamentals in Techniqu. Let me say that again. The students, in my opinion, and this is me as a public school teacher and even my college students, they need to spend more time on the fundamentals in Techniqu. I know it's really easy, and I've fallen in this trap many times, and I'm the first one to admit it. It's really easy to get repertoire driven and concert focused. I remember my first teaching job when I was teaching in Tennessee, and we were doing 4 middle school orchestra concerts a year. We were just going concert to concert to concert to concert. And I was trying to teach those things for the pieces for the concert. However, I realized early on, I wasn't spending enough time working and focusing on Techniqu. And there was actually, and I learned this from actually a band director that was a teacher in my district, an elementary school band director, whose group actually played at Midwest, now that I think back about this, the Midwest Clinic. He was like, we do 2 concerts a year. We do winter and we do spring. Everything else, we're learning the skills to get up to that point. So that's one reason I want to talk about this today is as I really think we need to spend more time on Techniqu and fundamentals. And I say this, we get concert focused because it's really too easy to push the Techniqu time, the time we should be spending on fundamentals, to the side when concert repertoire and concerts come up. So reason number 2 I want to focus on this is my students don't like playing out of method books. They don't like all the warm-up exercises I tried to do with them. So how do I get them to buy into those? I want my students to understand the why we're doing things, not just that we're doing this. We're just going to play an F major scale today, 2 octaves. I want them to know why we're playing an F major scale and how it connects to what's coming up or what they're doing now or what we're going to do next. And so I really want them to understand that. Reason number 3, I want to create units for my students that focused on specific skills and taught my students how to transfer those skills to the different settings. As I said, pieces, exercises, scales. So if I'm teaching my students finger patterns, whether it's this, or an open finger pattern, I want them to understand why we're doing that. And I want to create a unit based on that. So the first time that we're maybe using an open finger pattern like this in a flat key is not in a piece of music. I want to build us up to that. I want to scaffold us up to that as we're getting through there. So that's kind of where we're as I'm thinking through this, where we're starting today. So let's talk about the requirements. as I was thinking about this. As I'm teaching technique for my students, the first thing is I want my students to understand there's what the musical destination is before we start the journey. They have to know where we're going. Again, as I said, why are we learning this open finger pattern? They need to know why I'm working on that. Why am I teaching them 16th notes? Why are we doing the 16th note passage or section of book 2, of our method book 2? Why are we doing the 8th note, 2 16th notes? Why are we working on slurs? All of those things. So that's one of the first goals I want us to go for. 2, as I said, the students need to know the why for every exercise. We've talked about that a little bit. Number 3, we have to plan and teach with intentionality. I'm the first one to admit that in my teaching career, and unfortunately, I hate to say it, it still happens to all of us. It happens to me to this day, because I know I get distracted by other things. Something else comes up. We have to teach with intentionality. We have to have a plan every day we walk in the classroom. And we have to have a plan for that day, that week, that quarter, that semester, that year. We have to know our curriculum. We have to teach with intentionality and know where we're going. Next, we have to scaffold for all levels in our orchestra. As I'm thinking through this, I think about even the summer camp I just taught. I taught our top camp orchestra here, and we had kids that were playing Mendelssohn concertos and students that were playing Seitz concertos. They're both good players, but they're at a different level of playing. I need to be able to teach that and scaffold that to teach the technique I want for that younger player and for the more experienced player. So that's something else as I'm thinking about through this. Next, I think when we're teaching technique, we have to give our students the ability to isolate that technique. So if I'm teaching students, let's say a hooked bowing, they need to learn a hooked bowing. We need to isolate just the hooked bowing. Teaching a hooked bowing while we're learning, let's say, a C minor scale, probably not the best idea. What if we did that hooked bowing on a D major scale that's home base for our students? So we want to isolate that skill and really make it, if I'm working on something that's right hand, I'm going to make the left hand as easy as possible for my students so they can focus on just the skill we're learning. Then they need to learn the skill. And then, as we said, they need to learn to transfer that skill. And we're going to keep peeling that onion and making it a little harder every time they have to apply that skill to something else until we get to our end goal. And then we're going to keep peeling that onion as we go. A couple more on here is we have to provide the opportunity for students to process what we're working on, think about it, and then prepare for it. So we have to provide time for processing, thinking, and preparing. We can't just go, let's play this with a Colle bow stroke, ready, go. We have to go, okay, let's talk about what it takes to play a Colle bow stroke. What does it take to shift to 5th position here? We really need to give them a chance to think about it, prepare, and process that before we actually move on as we're going through this. So, and one other one on here, I think we've got 2 others, but the next to last one here is we have to use a variety of rote and method book exercises, preparatory exercises for this. We can't just throw it in our music and hope they get it. And I think I would hope all of us agree on that one. And last but not least, we have to use a variety of resources. As I think all of us would probably agree on if we were doing this live and face-to-face, is not all of our students have the same skill sets in our classroom. Some students are really great at learning music and playing it by reading the music and using notation. Some students are really great at playing by ear. So we have to have a variety of exercises that cater to both of those students. If I'm teaching something that's a difficult bow stroke and doing it with written exercises or method book exercises or excerpts I've pulled out of other music, that's going to challenge the student that is a better ear player than the person that can play by reading the notes much better, and vice versa. So again, we want to use a variety of resources as we're doing this. Before we move on, I just wanted what we're talking about today are just some examples of ways to do this. We only have 45 minutes. This easily could turn into an entire day of like, let's talk about vibrato, let's talk about shifting, let's talk about bow skills, let's talk about note reading, let's talk about rhythm, all of those things. But I want you to think about how to transfer what we're talking about today and really build what you need for your students based off your curriculum. I'm just going to try to share a blueprint of kind of ways I would connect the skills that my students and Techniqu my students are learning to the repertoire. And so that way you can transfer the idea of creating a unit to your own students' technical development. As one last final thing before we go on to the actual first concept we're going to talk about is every time I pick, and this is my soapbox, so you can ignore me if you want. My soapbox does not have to be yours. Is to me, when I am teaching orchestra, I am not teaching pieces. I am teaching concepts. I am teaching skills. And I want my pieces to reinforce those skills. I want my pieces I choose to reinforce the curriculum. I know as a young teacher, I fell in this the hole of I chose this because I really like it. But did I choose it because my students are ready for it? And did I choose it because it's reinforcing the skills I want my students to learn? So that is where my head is at every time I choose pieces and repertoire for my students. So as we start today, we're going to start with isolating skills. And excuse me, I'm going to get a drink of water real quick. We're going to talk about how to teach our students how to isolate skills. Because for me, this is a big part of this. If we can teach our students how to isolate skills, this is going to teach them how to practice. And I think we would all be happy if our students practiced more. So this is the first thing I want to talk about today as we're going through this. And I'm going to use the Allen beginning model. This was created by Michael Allen, who was one of my professors at Florida State University before he passed away. Wonderful professor, wonderful string pedagogue. But what is on your screen here is his beginning model here for teaching beginners. And by the way, I don't think this just applies to beginners. I think I can teach this when I'm teaching the Tchaikovsky Serenade for Strings. I used this weekend over the last week when I was teaching a Tender Moment in Time, a brand new piece that's by Adrian Gordon. What this does is it happens in 3 steps. If you're looking at the triangle here, the fat part of the triangle on the left side of your screen, those are the 3 basic skills our students need to play a string instrument. They have to have right hand skills. They have to be able to use the bow correctly, okay? And that can be whether it's beginners learning to bow for the first time, learning to hold their bow for the first time, but it could also be high school students learning how to do like a multiple hooked bowing, linked bowing, or long slur, or change from a martelé bow stroke to a marcato bow stroke to a spiccato bow stroke. All of those things, that's all right hand. And by the way, I'm the big believer in the right hand. This hand is so much harder to learn than the left hand for me. Okay, this is where I probably spend 90% of my teaching. I want to say I had a colleague this week who was teaching Motif by Cheryl J. Atwell, and they were trying to do it up to tempo. I think the tempo is marked like 136, 144, and she had it at about 135, and they couldn't get faster because the students' right hands weren't short enough. They weren't getting their bow strokes right. So again, the left hand side of your screen there is the 3 skill sets. It's right hand, left hand, and music reading. Now, music reading becomes less as an issue as students get older until we start throwing in like tenor clef for cellos. And as a cellist, even I'm like, tenor clef. My brain still has to think about it every once in a while because I don't see it on a daily basis in my life. And so we learn those skills individually. We're gonna talk about how to do this in a second in the beginning class. Then we start combining those skills in the middle column of your triangle, like box 2A, which we're going to put right hand and left hand together. So that means our students are going to play something via rote. Okay, they're going to play something that I play for them, and then they play it right back to me. Or box 2B there, left hand music reading. That means our students are going to pizzicato as they're reading something out of a book or a short piece or an excerpt or something I wrote on the board, something like that. That's an easy way to do that. Then we have box 2C, which is right-handed music reading. This means we're going to bow open strings while we're playing something, okay? We're combining the skills. Step 1 in that, 1A, 1B, 1C, is really simple things. It's one skill at a time. However, when we get to the second column, which is 2A, 2B, 2C, that's when we're starting to put 2 things together. We're putting right hand and left hand together, left hand and music reading together, and right hand and music reading together. And then the last step of this is the far right side of your screen, which is step 3. And that's when we're putting all 3 things together. Okay, we're doing right hand together with left hand while we're reading music. Okay, so this is how we teach our students how to practice. This is how we teach our students how to isolate the skills, to break down what they're working on. I had a friend who teaches at another university who actually took his group, his high school full symphony orchestra. His group was accepted to Midwest, and he used this exact model to play at the Midwest Clinic when they were auditioning to get in, and then learning their music for the Midwest Clinic. So to me, that just shows it can be used at any different level. So I want to show you how to kind of apply this sequence as we're going through here. So here's a teaching sequence where I would use the triangle, and I'm going to use can-can here kind of as our example as we're going through this. And I have a violin here with me. Hopefully you can see it as it goes through the background here. So the first thing here would be just singing and saying the note names. So I would have my students, because we all know we have students, even some get to high school, who struggle to read music. And so we want to get them to learn how to read music. So the first step of this, remember, this is our first box over there, first column, just music reading. So we're going to have them just say the notes. So we'll be going D, D, E, G, F sharp, E, A, B, F sharp, G, E, E, G, F sharp, E, D, D, C sharp, E, A, G, F sharp, E, D. Sorry, I'm not used to saying sharps when I do that. I usually don't. Yeah, we're going to play it and sing it that way. We're going to say finger numbers. Oh, 1, 3, 2, 1, oh. If I'm doing the violin or viola line or cello line, 1, 4, 3, 1, oh. I'm going to do it like that. That's going to be step one. We're going to really practice it that way. And then step two, they're going to play it while they're just pizzicato while they read the music. So in this case, they're just going to do it in pizzicato. And you can do guitar position if you like guitar position. I'm all for that because it lets you see the shape. So they could be going. Or just pizzicatoing, left-handed music reading. And we would do that. That would be step number two in this teaching sequence, to build it up. So we're scaffolding this form. Next three, we would actually shadow bow it. And I've got a trusty bow here. So we would just shadow bow it. So we'd put our violin in playing position, and I would put my bow underneath, or cellos would just put their no bow in their hand, and they would play it down like this, cellos and basses with no bow. So in here, I just want to see bow speed, and I want to see how much bow they're using, and I want to see string crossings. Are they raising that and lowering that arm for the different playing levels for the different strings? So if I'm doing this part right here, step number three, shadow bowing, which is right hand plus music reading, I would be going, if I'm a cello bass, let's say cello, we go D, D, bum, 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 ba, string crossing. Notice I'm not using my left hand. I'm just using the open strings it will be on. And I would do this while another student in the room is actually playing the tune, or I'm playing the tune. Or I could actually use, this is where I think MakeMusic Cloud's really cool. I can use the recordings for that to actually show it. And I'll show you that in a second, how I would do that, okay? Our next step would be ghosting it. Ghosting, all it is shadow bowing, but we're gonna add our left hand on our instrument. So if I'm ghosting it, I'm gonna have my left hand up here playing the correct notes while I'm shadow bowing down here underneath my arm, okay? Again, I've found that ghosting and shadow bowing also creates a very safe space for students as they're trying to learn this. They're learning to play it, but they're learning it where they don't have to make a mistake in front of their peers. So that's another really cool thing as we're ghosting through that. Then guess what? We're going to play it. We're going to play the whole thing as written, as with our instruments. And then here's what we do next. We loop it back to figure out where we were struggling. So for example, is it note reading your students are struggling on? If that's where the note reading, if that's where they were struggling, I'm going to loop back to step number one, where they're learning that. Is it, I just don't know what fingers to put down? I'm going to loop back to step number two. Is it they don't understand down bows and up bows or string crossings? I'm going to loop back to step number three. Let's say like they're really good at step one and two. I don't have to go back there. I can just go back to step number three. I don't need to repeat steps one and two. Let's say, and I think most of us have had this issue in our lives, especially teaching younger students or even older students, some more advanced stuff, coordination between the left hand and right hand. That's where I'm going to go to step number four. okay? And I'm gonna have them work on coordinating those things with no sound coming out while they're ghosting it. And then they'll play it again. Hopefully it's gotten better. If it's not, guess what? We loop back, okay? So this is a really cool way to do that as we're going through that. And just to kind of show you what I would do here, I'm gonna change my screen up here. I'm gonna flip over to MakeMusic Cloud. And I'm not actually going to play it with it because the timing of this with MakeMusic Cloud and me playing with it on Zoom doesn't work very well. If I was doing it by myself with MakeMusic Cloud, it would work perfectly fine. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to ghost it here. I've got the viola part of Can Can up here, but I'm going to ghost it on my violin here. So that means my left hand will be up here. My bow will be under the instrument, but I'm not going to make sound, but I'm going to use this as kind of my teacher model of what I would do in class. String crossing, 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 string crossing. So I would play it like that as I'm going through there, and then we would play it. So again, this is a great way. I can set this on loop, have this going as I'm walking around the room and actually correcting my students, correcting their posture, giving little individual lessons while I have that on loop while we're doing that. So that's kind of how I would teach my students how to isolate skills. And again, I can do that. I did that this weekend with Adrian Gordon's A Tender Moment in Time. There's some spots in there where my students were shifting because there's spots in there where the first violins go to third, and I think it was fifth position off the top of my head because they're getting up there. And so we isolated it that way. We went through and just said, okay, let's work on this. Let's pizzicato just the shift because we took this out. We took the rhythm out. We made it really simple to isolate those skills and teach the students how to do it. So the next thing I want to work on is bow geography. Again, as I told you earlier, the bow is, I think, the most important thing with students when we're working with them. It controls so much. And my pet peeve, I'll be very honest, my pet peeve is students who play with too much bow or not enough bow, or in the wrong part of the bow. And especially as we know, violas playing a different part of bow than the cellos and basses. I use the kind of the equation of, or the transfer, the analogy of, I think basses are like the semi-trucks of orchestra. Think about the brakes of a semi-truck. I equate this with the bow. If I am playing a double bass and I need to make a short sound, I only get like 1 inch of bow if I want to make a staccato sound. Cellos, you're like the minivans of orchestra. You get a little more bow than basses. Okay, the violas, I call them the Camrys, the sedans of orchestra. Okay, and they get a little more bow than the cellos. Okay, to get the same sound as a cello does, and the same sound as a bass does. The violins, now I'm not going to call them the sports car of orchestra because look, first off, I don't think violins need to think they're the sports car of orchestra, but I think they are very important. We'll call them the Teslas of the orchestra, the Mini Coopers of orchestra. They get a little more bow than the rest of us. So again, we have to adjust the amount of bow we're using per our group, within our group, to get the same sound across the sections, get a uniform sound. Those are things that I want to work on with my students. And so let's take something like this, Exhilaration by Cooper Ford. This is a grade 1 piece that I believe came out last year. It looks like 2022. I'm going to work this with my students. And ironically, I had I put this presentation together a week or two ago, and ironically, our youngest orchestra at the camp we just hosted at my university played this weekend. It made me really smile because I watched the teachers rehearse this. There's 2 master teachers, and they were working on things that we're talking about here. We're working on how to use bow distribution, how to plan our bows ahead. How much bow in this piece do I want to use for half notes? How much bow do I want to use for quarter notes and eighth notes? Well, for me in this piece, I want to know my destination. I know in this piece, I want to use whole bows for half notes whenever possible. I want to use half bows for quarter notes, and I want to use quarter bows for eighth notes. This is the final destination. If I'm driving to Toronto from my house, I need a map, Google Maps, go to AAA, print it out from MapQuest if you're old school like I was when I was growing up. I have to know the destination. So that's my destination. How do I get there? Well, I'm going to take something simple first off, and I'm going to teach my students the bowing I want on a D major scale. Again, this is our home base. So what we're going to do is we're going to play our D major scale here, and we're going to do just half notes. So we're going to be going. Using full bows. We'll go all the way up. Then I'm going to do the same thing with quarter notes. And I'm going to do each quarter note twice just on a half bow. Then I'm going to do the eighth notes on quarter bows. So I'll do that. Then guess what? I'm going to start reducing the number of quarter notes I play. I may go still with half bows. I may do the same on eighths. Or I may go. Again, that's really simple for our students, hopefully, because D major scale, that's home base. That's the chocolate chip cookie of orchestra. That's something that everybody in there can hopefully likes and can do. So we're going to do that as an orchestra. And I may break it up where one section does the whole note part, one section does the quarter note part eventually, one section does the eighth note part. But again, I'm going to take a simple scale out of my method book, or I'm going to teach it by rote, and I'm going to do it that way. Then I'm going to pick something that my students can really do. In this case, I'm working with younger students. And again, I may do this with 7th or 8th graders. You're probably looking at the screen going, that looks really simple. Well, it's supposed to be. I want it to be simple, and I want to take the left hand out of the equation. Okay. Heather, I see you jumped in there. Do we have a question?
Yes, I know we checked beforehand, but we're still having an issue with the sound when you play extended bowing. So make sure to click enable original sound, please.
Okay.
Upper left.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. It's going great.
No worries. Thank you.
I thought it was fine. Just the sustained notes. Thank you.
Okay. No worries. Thank you. So, okay. I appreciate Heather giving me the heads up. But as we all know, virtual teaching does not always go as we plan. And so again, here, I'm just going to take the same concept I just did. My goal is to get to Exhilaration by Cooper Ford. So we're going to play this with just using the whole notes on this bass line here from Can from Sound Information. So we're just going to be doing, and I'm not actually going to play it since I know the sound is messed up. So we have the D, we're using just whole notes here. Then we're going to use our half bows for those, then whole bows on the half notes again. Again, I'm going to write this in the student's part, or I'm going to project it on the screen so my students can easily do this. And again, we're making it simple, removing the left hand from this. Okay. Then what we're going to do from there is we're going to play the tune, and we're going to play the tune with those bowings. So we're going to be going whole bow, half, 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 whole bow, half, 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 whole bow, half, 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 half. I can't sing today, whole bow. So we're going to do it that way. We're going to make it really easy. And again, this is where a great place is. I can go to Smart or MakeMusic Cloud here. I can put this up on my screen for my students, as you see me doing it real quick for my students, and I can walk around the room. I can go up here and start. I can have them say whole, so they can say the bow, how much bow they're going to use on each note as we're going. Whole, half, 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 whole, half, 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 whole, and so on and so on. They can shadow bow it. Go back to our teaching sequence before. They can ghost it. They can, and so then they can play it. A lot of different ways to do that to make it work for them. Okay. Then I'm going to go to the all-encompassing version of this in this method book, which I think this is the cooler part, is now I can differentiate this for my students based off where they are at in their playing. My students who have that, they're ready for the tune. They can play the tune that's on your screen. The students that are still struggling, I'm going to keep them on the bass line. Okay, because again, if they're struggling, I want them to focus on the right hand, not the left hand. So they're just going to play the open string part, because again, the bass line of this is all open strings. Doesn't matter what instrument you're playing. The students that are kind of in between that, they're going to go to the harmony part. It's a little easier than the tune part, but it still involves left hand. And again, when they're done with that and they're ready, they can move on to the tune. The all-star kids in our class, the kids that are ready to move on, they play it once, they're ready to move on. We all have those. They're ready for the variation down there, where they're going to use the quarter bows for the eighth notes, half bows for the quarter notes, and so on. So again, easy way to do this to really work on it. And that brings us back to our main theme, to exhilaration. This is something simple that I wrote last time I taught exhilaration. This is the theme sheet. So in this case, my students are going to play this, and I'm like, I won't play it because I know we're having sound issues. They're going to be playing it with the bowies we talked about. Remember, half notes are whole bows, quarter notes are half bows, and eighth notes are quarter bows. So now we're going to be playing it whole bow, half, half, whole bow, half, 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 whole bow, and so on and so on. The only thing that's not on there that we haven't talked about is the very last note. Hey students, I want you to slow your bow speed to like 4 miles an hour. Okay, I want you to put it like you think Dr. Pope drives, really slow. Okay, and again, I'll use myself as an example. I'm self-deprecating with my classes. So again, that's an easy way we can do that. Okay, we can also take that back to MakeMusic Cloud there, and have our students play their parts with this, working on the same thing. Really simple here is to pull it straight up here, and we have the first violin part here, and they can play it with using quarter bows on the first line, and then they're going to go to half and whole bows on the second line. So if they were playing it. So this is what it would look like. Rest, rest, D, 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 D. Quarter, 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 whole, half, half, whole, half, 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 whole, half, half, quarter, half, half, quarter, half, half, quarter, and so on and so on. That's an easy way to kind of get it to work on it. And again, if we're not quite ready for it, we can slow that down for our students if we need to, give them a better chance to succeed, which is the goal of this. We want them to have positive experiences so they can succeed. Okay, and then we would go back and play that. And everybody would play their parts, thinking about those things we're talking about with bow geography. And I didn't talk about where I play those in the bow yet. Right now, I'm just focusing on this is my unit I would build, how much bow to use. The next part of this will be where to start in the bow. We all know violins, violas start a little higher in the bow than cellos and basses. That's where I would go next with my students on that. And this would be probably the first part of the unit, and that would be the second part of that unit. But I can teach that to beginners. I can teach that to high schoolers, and I've had to teach that to high schoolers. Again, my colleague and I had to teach that to high schoolers this weekend because they were running out of bows. The difference between high schoolers who run out of bows and beginners. High schoolers, when they run out of bow, they will wait the duration of the note. Elementary students or beginners who run out of bow, less experienced players who run out of bow, when they run out of bow, the note is over and they go on to the next note. And that's when our concerts fall apart. And I think some of us have lived that. I know I have with some of my younger students, not in a concert, but in many rehearsals. So we would do that. So the last thing I want to talk about today is difficult rhythms. So let's start with this piece right here, Moonlight Tango by Richard Meyer. As we're looking at Moonlight Tango here, I want you to look through there. This is where I would typically ask if we were doing this live, like, hey, what's the hardest thing? What here is going to make our orchestras struggle? And the answer I typically get in this is the dotted quarter note. I'll be very honest with you. I struggled, and I tell my students this, I struggled to learn how to count a dotted quarter note correctly all the way into high school. It's one of those things that my brain couldn't process. So this is something that I would start. Again, we're starting with the end in mind, dotted quarter notes. Dotted quarter notes to me, it's bad things. It's orchestra poison at times. This thing that can take us down. So how do we fix dotted quarter notes? It's the nemesis of all students. So again, I'm going to start with something simple. If you would have noticed, Moonlight Tango is in A minor. So I'm going to pick my A minor scale out of my book, And I'm going to have my students play every pitch, every note you see there. So the A, they're going to play with this first rhythm. They're going to play everything as 4/8 notes, just like that. Again, then the next group's going to, then they're going to learn how to play it like that. So it would be A, B, bum, and so on and so on. And then next one, we would do quarter. A, B, B. And then we would learn how to do the half notes, just like this. Then we would start putting those in pairs. I would have half the orchestra, violins, play rhythm number 1 on the board there. I want the violas, cellos, and bass to play rhythm number 2. Because that way, my rhythm number 2 people can listen to my rhythm number 1 people and learn to subdivide. I think for most of us, rhythm, subdivision, not counting is where our students go to struggle most of the time. Again, my summer camp students just struggled with this. They're really good musicians. They're young musicians. They struggled sight reading. They struggled the first day or 2 of camp because they don't count. So, and hopefully your students are better than mine, but I have a feeling we all live in the same world of students who don't always count consistently. So again, we would have half the group play 1, half the group play 2. Then I may have half the group play 2, half the group play 3, and I'm going to do different combinations of that. I'm going to try to cause musical rhythmic chaos so the students have to really learn to count. And I want to show you again how to create a unit with this. This is a really cool thing here. This is called emilrhythm.com. This was created by a band director at Ohio State University. So this is not me. I want to give him full credit for it. I think his name is Scott Jones. Okay. And so what I want to show you here is how would I use this tool to help my students count dotted quarter notes better. And I'm going to enlarge my screen over here. So first off over here, there is a bunch of different levels. Come on, there it goes. And I can choose over here. So I'm going to go down to dotted quarter notes, level 2. And I'm going to hit load all right here. What I'm going to do is build a rhythmic line for my students, and I can make it include any of these different things. Okay, so I'm going to keep it simple for us up here for the time being, and I'm just going to choose ones without 16th notes. I'm going to choose that one there. You see I chose that one. Let's choose this one here. Let's choose this one here, and let's choose this one. So I chose 4 measures. What you'll see now is these 4 measures appear at the top. Now here's the cool part. I can put these measures in a different order. So I want to put this first measure, let's make it last. So I'm going to click the right arrow. I want to follow it over, and now it's last. Okay. The other thing I'm going to do up here is what's going to happen is here in a second, when I hit play, what you're going to see is you're going to see one measure at a time appear on the screen for 4 beats. So it'll appear for 4 beats. It'll count like 1, 2, 3, 4. You'll see it for 4 beats, and then that measure disappears. Okay. And our students have to play it or clap it back. And when those 4 beats are over, the next measure appears, and then so on and so on. And I've got it so that it appears for all 4 beats. So I'm going to hit play show, and I'll show you how this works. Again, I'm working on dotted quarter notes with my students. The first thing I'm going to do is have them count and clap it. Then we may go to pizzicatoing. We may go to bowing on open strings. We may do this on a scale. I may pick 8 measures, and each measure is a different scale degree. So a different way to do that. So here's what I'll do. I'll show you kind of how it works. So here, we're memorizing what it looks like. 1 and 2 and 3, 4, and memorize. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and memorize. It disappears. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and memorize. 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and really simple. Again, I can make this as long as I want. If I go back to my create button here, again, it saves what I had there. I could add more measures of that. If I want to make it really hard, I can make it so, first off, let's reorder our measures down here. I'm going to reorder some of these by just clicking those arrows. This time, let's say I want to make it really hard. They're just going to see it for 1 beat. So this time you're going to have 3 beats of rest where it doesn't appear. It's going to appear on beat 4, and then it disappears and they have to clap it. We're going to use the same 4 measures. What I like about this is it makes students memorize patterns. Music is patterns. I want to make them memorize this. So this time I've made it harder, and you could show it on beats 3 and 4. You could show it on just beats 1 and 2 by clicking these buttons up here. I could just show it on beat 4, which is what I'm going to do now. I can change the tempo. I could add subdivision, all those things. We'll do this one, and I'll show you what this looks like. Hit play here. So this is panic time. 2, 3. Memorize. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. And panic, panic, panic. Memorize. 1, and 2, and 3, 4. And panic. This is what's going through the student's head. Memorize. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. And memorize. Set. Here it is. And there. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And again, something really simple, a way to show that. And again, there's so many different rhythms you can choose from. I chose these level 2 rhythms here, just so you can kind of scroll down here. Again, this is emilrhythm.com, really, really cool. Again, I can build a whole unit on rhythm based off the rhythm I'm teaching my students there as we're doing that. Then what I would do, I would go back and I would put it back in with my method book exercise here. We would subdivide this whole thing. We would play the first line just as eighth notes, G, 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 C, B, B, all as eighth notes, subdivide that, put it all back in context the same way, and then we would go back to our Moonlight Tango there and put it in context. Well, thank you for your time today. I'll turn it back over to Heather.
All right, well, thank you, David, so much for that fantastic discussion.